The entertainment world was shaken to its core when Jaguar Wright, the fiercely outspoken singer and industry veteran, dropped a bombshell revelation about Angie Stone's tragic passing. What initially appeared to be a devastating car accident has now taken a sinister turn, with Wright alleging that Stone's death was far from accidental. The controversy erupted during one of Wright's live-stream sessions, where she revealed shocking details about the circumstances surrounding Stone's final days. According to Wright, the beloved neo-soul artist had been embroiled in a bitter battle with powerful figures in the music industry, fighting to reclaim what was rightfully hers after years of alleged exploitation. Wright's claims gained immediate attention due to her reputation for speaking truth to power, particularly when it comes to exposing the dark underbelly of the entertainment business. Her testimony pointed to a disturbing pattern of events leading up to Stone's untimely demise. Just weeks before the fatal crash, Stone had taken to social media to voice her frustrations about systematic theft by industry executives, promising to break her silence on matters that had troubled her for decades. These revelations, combined with Wright's insider knowledge, have cast a shadow of suspicion over what authorities had ruled an unfortunate accident. The implications of Wright's statements extend far beyond Stone's individual case, suggesting a broader conspiracy involving some of the most influential players in the music business. She described how Stone had discovered discrepancies in her royalty payments, mechanical rights, and publishing royalties, amounting to millions of dollars that had allegedly been siphoned off by record labels and management teams. This financial manipulation wasn't just limited to Stone. Wright suggested it represented a systemic issue affecting countless artists, particularly those from earlier generations who might not have fully understood the complexities of music contracts and digital rights management. What makes Wright's account particularly compelling is her detailed description of Stone's emotional state during their last conversations. Far from being despondent or careless, Stone reportedly expressed determination to fight back against the system that had exploited her. She had begun compiling documents, reaching out to legal representatives, and planning public disclosures about the alleged corruption within Universal Music Group and other major labels. Wright emphasized how Stone's resolve seemed to grow stronger each day, making her sudden death appear increasingly suspicious in retrospect. The timing of Stone's passing raises additional red flags, especially considering she had recently announced plans to expose the inner workings of the industry's financial practices. Wright recounted how Stone had confided in her about receiving threatening messages and experiencing unusual pressure from various industry contacts in the weeks leading up to the accident. These details, coupled with Stone's documented attempts to reclaim her rightful earnings, create a narrative that contradicts the official explanation of a simple traffic collision. As Wright continued to share her insights, patterns emerged that suggested Stone might have been targeted for her willingness to speak out against powerful interests. The complexity of the situation deepened as Wright revealed specific instances where Stone had encountered resistance while trying to investigate her financial records. She described how certain doors had been systematically closed to Stone, with industry professionals suddenly becoming unavailable or uncooperative when approached about discrepancies in her accounts. Particularly alarming were the accounts of Stone's interactions with label executives who allegedly used intimidating tactics to discourage her from pursuing further investigations. Wright shared how these experiences had left Stone feeling increasingly isolated, but more determined than ever to bring these issues to light. Perhaps most disturbing were Wright's claims about Stone's last video message, recorded just days before the accident. In this footage, Stone reportedly spoke candidly about her intentions to expose the systematic exploitation of artists' rights, specifically naming individuals and companies involved in what she described as institutionalized theft. The video, according to Wright, contained information so damaging that it could have potentially dismantled long-standing power structures within the music industry. This context adds chilling significance to Stone's subsequent death, raising questions about whether her decision to speak out might have sealed her fate in ways no one could have anticipated at the time. As Jaguar Wright delved deeper into her revelations about Angie Stone's final days, she painted a harrowing picture of an industry entrenched in systematic exploitation, where powerful figures manipulated artists' careers and finances with calculated precision. The evidence Wright presented extended far beyond mere allegations, encompassing a comprehensive network of financial misconduct that reached into the highest echelons of the music business. Detailed bank records obtained through private investigators showed a complex web of transactions involving shell companies and offshore accounts, all designed to obscure the true flow of money generated by artists like Stone. These documents revealed how royalties from streaming services, album sales and licensing agreements were funneled through multiple layers of corporate entities before disappearing entirely from artists' statements. The scale of the alleged theft became apparent as Wright outlined specific instances of financial manipulation. For example, Stone's hit single Wish I Didn't Miss You had generated millions in revenue through radio play, television placements, and digital streams, yet her royalty statements reflected only a fraction of these earnings. More disturbing was the revelation that Universal Music Group had allegedly created dummy accounts to absorb portions of these revenues, effectively laundering the money through legitimate-looking channels before it vanished completely. Wright produced correspondence showing how Stone's management team had repeatedly dismissed her concerns about these discrepancies, often using technical jargon and convoluted explanations to justify the missing funds. Particularly damning was the documentation Wright shared regarding mechanical royalties and publishing rights. Industry insiders confirmed that many artists from Stone's era had unknowingly signed away significant portions of their rights during initial contract negotiations. In Stone's case, the situation was exacerbated by multiple copyright transfers and sub-licensing agreements that had been executed without her full understanding or consent. Wright obtained internal memos from publishing houses that demonstrated how these rights were subsequently sold and resold between various entities, each transaction further reducing the percentage of earnings that would eventually reach Stone. The documents revealed a sophisticated scheme where even successful songs generated minimal income for their original creators, while executives and middlemen reaped substantial profits. The investigation uncovered another layer of exploitation through touring and merchandise revenues. Concert promoters and venue operators allegedly colluded with management teams to manipulate box office reports and merchandise sales figures. Wright shared copies of tour settlement sheets that showed gross underreporting of ticket sales and merchandising income, with discrepancies sometimes reaching 60% or more of actual earnings. These practices were facilitated by exclusive vendor agreements and opaque accounting methods that made it nearly impossible for artists to track their true earnings. The situation was compounded by advances and recoupment clauses that kept artists perpetually indebted to their labels, ensuring a steady stream of revenue for companies while leaving performers financially vulnerable. Perhaps most alarming was the revelation about how these exploitative practices were maintained through psychological manipulation and professional intimidation. Wright described how industry veterans would often warn younger artists about the consequences of questioning financial arrangements, citing examples of performers whose careers had mysteriously stalled after demanding transparency. The documentation included emails and text messages showing how managers and executives coordinated efforts to isolate artists who raised concerns, cutting them off from potential allies and support networks within the industry. This systematic gaslighting created an environment where victims doubted their own perceptions of reality, making them less likely to pursue investigations into their financial affairs. The technological aspect of this exploitation added another dimension to the scandal. Digital distribution platforms and streaming services had allegedly been complicit in maintaining the status quo, providing incomplete data reports and utilizing complex algorithms that obscured true usage metrics. Wright obtained access to internal analytics dashboards that revealed significant disparities between reported streams and actual listener engagement numbers. These discrepancies were particularly pronounced for legacy artists like Stone, whose catalog had accumulated millions of plays across various platforms yet generated disproportionately low royalty payments. The data suggested a deliberate effort to depress earnings for older recordings while prioritizing newer releases from emerging artists tied to more lucrative deals. The documentation also exposed how these practices had evolved over time to take advantage of changing consumption patterns and technological advancements. As the industry shifted from physical sales to digital distribution, new opportunities for exploitation emerged. Streaming rates were structured in ways that disproportionately benefited labels and distributors while minimizing payouts to artists. Wright shared examples of contracts that had been quietly amended to include unfavorable streaming terms, often without proper notification or consent from affected performers. These modifications were typically buried in dense legal language, making them difficult for artists to identify or contest. Perhaps most significantly, Wright's investigation revealed how these exploitative practices had become institutionalized within the industry's infrastructure. Major labels and publishing houses had developed entire departments dedicated to managing royalty calculations and rights administration, staffed by professionals trained to maximize company profits while minimizing artist payouts. The documentation showed how these operations were supported by sophisticated software systems designed to automate complex financial manipulations, creating a veneer of legitimacy around practices that were fundamentally predatory. Even seemingly innocuous provisions like administrative fees and processing charges were shown to erode artists' earnings through cumulative effects that became apparent only after years of operation. The human impact of this systematic exploitation manifested in countless stories of broken promises and shattered dreams. Wright shared testimonies from numerous artists who had experienced similar situations, painting a picture of an industry that thrived on maintaining power imbalances and exploiting artists' vulnerabilities. Many performers had invested their entire lives in their craft, only to find themselves struggling financially despite achieving commercial success. The psychological toll of these experiences was evident in the accounts of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse that plagued many victims of this predatory system. For artists like Stone, who had dedicated decades to their artistry, the realization that their contributions had been monetarily devalued represented not just financial loss but a fundamental betrayal of trust. Jaguar Wright's emotional journey in pursuing justice for Angie Stone has been nothing short of extraordinary, marked by both profound personal transformation and unwavering determination to expose the truth. Her involvement began as a matter of professional solidarity, given their shared experiences navigating the treacherous waters of the music industry, but quickly evolved into a deeply personal crusade for accountability. Wright describes how her initial skepticism about Stone's suspicions transformed into certainty after reviewing the extensive documentation Stone had compiled in her final months. Each spreadsheet, contract amendment, and internal memo they examined together added another layer to Wright's understanding of the systematic exploitation pervading the industry she'd called home for decades. The emotional weight of this realization became particularly acute when Wright discovered Stone's handwritten notes detailing her growing fears and frustrations. These journals revealed a woman grappling with the painful realization that her trust had been betrayed by the very institutions she had worked so hard to succeed within. Wright found herself reliving her own experiences of industry manipulation through Stone's words, creating a powerful emotional connection that fueled her resolve to speak out. The nights spent poring over financial records and legal documents became cathartic sessions where Wright processed not just Stone's story but her own history of navigating similar challenges throughout her career. Perhaps most challenging was Wright's decision to go public with her findings, knowing the potential consequences for her own career and safety. The sleepless nights spent weighing the risks against the moral imperative to expose the truth took a visible toll on her well-being. Yet each attempt to intimidate or discourage her only strengthened her commitment to honoring Stone's memory by bringing these injustices to light. Wright describes how sharing Stone's story became a form of therapy, allowing her to confront her own trauma while simultaneously fighting for change within an industry that had long needed reform. The professional ramifications of Wright's advocacy have been significant, with several high-profile collaborations and performance opportunities suddenly disappearing from her calendar. Industry insiders suggest that her vocal criticism of established power structures has made her persona non grata among certain circles, yet Wright remains undeterred. Her evolution from respected industry veteran to whistleblower has forced her to develop new skills in investigative journalism and legal research, transforming her into an unlikely but formidable advocate for artists' rights. This transformation has brought unexpected alliances with lawyers, forensic accountants, and other artists willing to share their own stories of exploitation, creating a network of support that sustains her through the most challenging moments of her crusade. Through this process, Wright has discovered reservoirs of strength and resilience she never knew she possessed. The experience of championing Stone's cause has redefined her purpose, shifting her focus from personal artistic achievement to systemic change within the industry. She speaks openly about how this journey has helped her process her own past traumas while giving meaning to her continued presence in an industry she once considered leaving entirely. The emotional scars remain, but they now serve as reminders of why her fight is necessary and worth every sacrifice. The systemic exploitation revealed through Angie Stone's case has sent shockwaves through the music industry, prompting a widespread reckoning that extends far beyond individual grievances to challenge fundamental power structures. Major record labels and publishing houses are now facing unprecedented scrutiny as artists and industry professionals alike demand greater transparency and accountability in financial practices. The revelations have triggered a cascade of similar accusations from established and emerging artists, creating a groundswell of momentum for reform that shows no signs of abating. Industry analysts note that this moment represents a potential paradigm shift in how artists negotiate their place within the business ecosystem, with many calling for complete restructuring of royalty systems and rights management protocols. The impact on industry dynamics has been particularly evident in how younger artists approach their careers and contractual negotiations. A new generation of performers, armed with greater awareness of historical exploitation patterns, is increasingly insisting on more equitable terms and greater control over their intellectual property. This shift has forced traditional power brokers to adapt or risk losing access to emerging talent. Several prominent law firms specializing in entertainment contracts have reported a significant increase in artists seeking independent counsel before signing deals, reflecting a growing sophistication among creatives about protecting their interests. The establishment of artist-led collectives and alternative distribution platforms suggests a fundamental realignment of power dynamics within the industry. Professional relationships throughout the music business have undergone dramatic transformations as trust becomes an increasingly scarce commodity. Management companies and talent agencies face mounting pressure to demonstrate their commitment to artists' best interests rather than serving as gatekeepers for larger corporate interests. The traditional hierarchy where labels held disproportionate power over artists' careers is gradually giving way to more collaborative models, though progress remains uneven and contested. Notably, several high-profile managers have severed ties with major labels amid accusations of complicity in exploitative practices, signaling a potential fragmentation of long-standing industry alliances. The ripple effects extend into adjacent sectors of the entertainment world, with film studios and streaming platforms reassessing their partnerships with music industry players implicated in the scandal. Content creators are becoming more discerning about which projects to associate with, while brand sponsors are increasingly cautious about aligning with artists managed by controversial entities. This creates a complex web of interdependent consequences that continues to reshape how business is conducted across various entertainment verticals. The emergence of blockchain technology and smart contracts as potential solutions for transparent royalty distribution reflects the industry's desperate search for mechanisms to restore credibility and fairness to artist compensation models. Most significantly, the revelations have catalyzed discussions about establishing independent oversight bodies to monitor industry practices and protect artists' rights. Influential industry veterans have joined forces with regulatory experts to propose frameworks for ethical conduct and financial transparency, while grassroots movements gain traction among working musicians demanding fundamental changes. The collective pressure has forced even the most resistant institutions to acknowledge the need for reform, though implementation remains a contentious process marked by resistance from entrenched power structures. This ongoing struggle represents perhaps the most significant challenge to traditional industry hierarchies since the advent of digital distribution, with outcomes that could redefine the creative economy for generations to come. The situation has grown increasingly complicated with the departure of Anthony Rico, one of New York's most respected attorneys, from Diddy's legal team. Rico's sudden exit, citing irreconcilable differences, has raised speculation about the strength of the evidence against Diddy. Industry insiders suggest that Rico's decision may be related to newly discovered materials that proved too damaging for him to continue representing the music mogul. This development follows the dramatic decision by Grubman Shire Miselas and Sachs, Diddy's longtime law firm, to sever ties with him, reportedly under pressure from high-profile clients like Lady Gaga. The firm's withdrawal represents a significant blow to Diddy's defense strategy, as they had represented him for over 2 decades and possessed intimate knowledge of his legal affairs. Diddy's attempts to suppress evidence have met with particularly strong resistance from the prosecution, who argue that the materials in question represent crucial documentation of systematic exploitation. Legal analysts suggest that these suppression efforts may backfire, drawing attention to the very evidence Diddy seeks to conceal. The defense's strategy appears increasingly reactive rather than proactive, with Agnifillo's team struggling to counter the cumulative weight of testimonial evidence from multiple victims spanning different eras of Diddy's career. Each piece of evidence, from video footage to digital records, builds upon the others to create a detailed narrative that prosecutors believe will be difficult to refute in court. Perhaps most concerning for Diddy's defense is the growing number of witnesses who have agreed to cooperate with prosecutors, including several former associates who were previously considered loyal to him. These developments have forced Diddy's remaining legal team to shift their focus toward damage control, attempting to negotiate plea deals or immunity agreements for lesser charges while preparing for the possibility of a full trial. The complexity of managing multiple charges across different jurisdictions has further complicated their strategy, leading to what some observers describe as a defensive posture that appears increasingly reactive rather than proactive. As the trial approaches, Diddy's defense finds itself in the challenging position of having to simultaneously address mounting evidence, manage public perception, and prepare for potentially devastating testimony from high-profile witnesses like Ashton Kutcher. The departure of key legal figures and the firm's withdrawal have left him with a reduced team of 5 attorneys, led by Mark Agnifillo. Sources close to the case suggest that internal disagreements have emerged about how aggressively to challenge certain pieces of evidence, particularly the video footage and digital records that appear to directly contradict Diddy's public statements. The situation has grown increasingly complicated with the departure of Anthony Rico, one of New York's most respected attorneys, from Diddy's legal team. Rico's sudden exit, citing irreconcilable differences, has raised speculation about the strength of the evidence against Diddy. Industry insiders suggest that Rico's decision may be related to newly discovered materials that proved too damaging for him to continue representing the music mogul. This development follows the dramatic decision by Grubman Shire Meisels and Sachs, Diddy's longtime law firm, to sever ties with him, reportedly under pressure from high-profile clients like Lady Gaga. The firm's withdrawal represents a significant blow to Diddy's defense strategy, as they had represented him for over 2 decades and possessed intimate knowledge of his legal affairs. Diddy's attempts to suppress evidence have met with particularly strong resistance from the prosecution, who argue that the materials in question represent crucial documentation of systematic exploitation. Legal analysts suggest that these suppression efforts may backfire, drawing attention to the very evidence Diddy seeks to conceal. The defense's strategy appears increasingly reactive rather than proactive, with Agnifillo's team struggling to counter the cumulative weight of testimonial evidence from multiple victims spanning different eras of Diddy's career. Each piece of evidence, from video footage to digital records, builds upon the others to create a detailed narrative that prosecutors believe will be difficult to refute in court. Perhaps most concerning for Diddy's defense is the growing number of witnesses who have agreed to cooperate with prosecutors, including several former associates who were previously considered loyal to him. These developments have forced Diddy's remaining legal team to shift their focus toward damage control, attempting to negotiate plea deals or immunity agreements for lesser charges while preparing for the possibility of a full trial. The complexity of managing multiple charges across different jurisdictions has further complicated their strategy, leading to what some observers describe as a defensive posture that appears increasingly reactive rather than proactive. As the trial approaches, Diddy's defense finds itself in the challenging position of having to simultaneously address mounting evidence, manage public perception, and prepare for potentially devastating testimony from high-profile witnesses like Ashton Kutcher. The departure of key legal figures and the firm's withdrawal have left him with a reduced team of 5 attorneys, led by Mark Agnifillo. Sources close to the case suggest that internal disagreements have emerged about how aggressively to challenge certain pieces of evidence, particularly the video footage and digital records that appear to directly contradict Diddy's public statements. The implications of these legal developments extend far beyond Diddy's immediate case. They signal a potential sea change in how the entertainment industry addresses allegations of misconduct by powerful figures. The coordinated exits of top-tier legal representation suggest that the evidence against Diddy may be more substantial than initially anticipated, potentially setting a precedent for how similar cases are handled in the future. Moreover, the involvement of high-profile witnesses like Ashton Kutcher adds another layer of complexity, as their testimonies could influence public perception and industry standards regarding accountability and transparency. As the trial approaches, the entertainment industry finds itself at a crossroads. The outcome of this case could determine whether long-standing power dynamics will continue to protect influential figures or if a new era of accountability will emerge. The mounting evidence, coupled with the strategic maneuvering of both prosecution and defense teams, suggests that this trial may become a landmark moment in Hollywood's history, one that could redefine how the industry handles allegations of abuse and exploitation. With so much at stake, all eyes remain fixed on the proceedings, waiting to see whether justice will prevail or if the system will find a way to protect one of its most prominent figures yet again.